individual difference to look at. So I'll do that soon. Yes. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
People ask some things I already wanted to say.
Yeah.
To your social network study,
Yeah.
I'm curious about why you think positive empathy is going to be the most, I guess, or the more important thing when it comes to seeking out support in that highly stressful period. Because I don't study this, but my intuition would be that people would seek out people who can empathize with their negative emotions, like I'm really stressed out, versus, oh, I had a really good cup of coffee today. Perform a terrible exam. Why would positive empathy be especially unique in this case, and how do you think that would differentiate? Because I also imagine, like, if they're also currently stressed, how their ability to experience positive empathy and that might change. If they have a lot of demands on them.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I think I may have characterized myself a little bit, 'cause I'm not obsessed with positive empathy. I like the other pieces. So we will be looking at, we do think negative empathy will be important, and all the like personal distress. So those are all things that will kind of simultaneously enter into the model to see which ones are predicting things like supporting people and being buffered from stress. So I definitely don't think positive empathy is the only predictor of reduced stress. I just kind of played that up to kind of demonstrate that it has some value. In particular, the times of low stress, it might be more important, like you're saying. But in terms of times of acute stress, maybe you will need someone who supports you well during a negative event, in which case we have nominations about different types of empathy too. So, yes. So sorry.
In most of the studies that you presented, it seemed like people were either instructed to feel positive or negative. Or even in the scanner studies, even if they were not instructed, they sort of knew what you wanted them to do. So I'm wondering whether there's a difference between asking somebody how much you shared this person's joy or sorrow, versus measuring it unobtrusively when they don't show. So maybe by showing them something and measuring their facial expressions, or some other way. So I guess my question is, would you expect there to be different results when you instruct people feel this versus when you don't instruct? Or would you think that one is just stronger than the other? Would it predict different outcomes? Are they different animals, or are they correlated animals? What's their predictive power to some other outcome?
So we had a similar question, and I actually describe it, but in the neuroimaging paradigm, I had two other conditions, but I presented one to kind of provide a simpler perspective on it. But we also had, before we asked them to empathize, we did have some blocks where we just said, imagine you've come across these pictures in a magazine and just respond naturally. So we did have a condition like that. The other condition that we had was we had people look at these pictures while we asked them to memorize an 8-digit number. So we were trying to see if cognitive load or being busy would actually decrease or inhibit your empathy. What we found in terms of, we compared neural activity when you're watching compared to when you're empathizing, and we didn't find any striking differences, which we thought was, weird. We thought that instructing people to empathize would obviously elevate or potentially like make the neural activity more robust. One possibility is that people, these events were pretty extreme, so they are already kind of empathizing pretty naturally. Another reason is that in this particular paradigm, they didn't effectively ramp up their empathy that much in the empathize condition. So I don't think it's, and one of our questions was, is it different, like the natural capacity versus when you're instructed? So we originally thought there might be gender differences. So sorry if this is offensive. One idea was that women might kind of naturally be responding, but men might be able to actually, when instructed, empathize just as much as women, but might not naturally respond the same way, which we didn't find evidence for. But that is kind of an open question. And I don't think it's that it doesn't happen. I just think in our particular paradigm, we didn't see neural differences. So
you found even spontaneously
similar neural responses to spontaneously as instructed empathy. So not what we thought, but we were trying to answer that same question because it's an interesting one.
Actually, I have a similar question, so I'll ask another one. When we think about the construct of empathy, so there's a piece of sort of sensitivity to another, the process piece. And then there's the outcome piece, the valence.
Right.
And you're finding the difference in valence, which I guess we'd expect to some extent, although I found the research very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm curious about this process piece, the sensitivity piece. So there are two parts to, I guess, my question. One is, do you find that people who are, let's look at the individual difference.
Yeah.
People high on positive empathy, are they more likely to be high on negative empathy? The early study suggested not. But when we think about empathy, we think about that process piece.
Yes.
We would expect them to be correlated or highly related. I have a question about that.
Yes.
And the second piece has to do with if it's sensitivity, you see somebody feel or you see somebody else's reaction, you're feeling it.
Yeah.
That seems somewhat different to sort of imagining, simulation, which is what you're thinking about when you're when you're thinking about helping somebody else, you have to imagine what they're going to feel like. So I want you to just kind of talk more broadly about empathy.
So in terms of the earlier results, I did show that they have distinct intercorrelations, but the constructs themselves are strongly correlated, so about 0.5. Okay. But the point was they're correlated, but we still see some distinction.
Right. Due to the valence.
Yeah. Yeah, so in general it seems like they're correlated and people are sensitive to both. One of my ideas for future research is thinking about people who aren't correlated, so thinking about the off quadrants. So are there certain clinical disorders in which you're experiencing a lot of positive empathy but not negative empathy, and what are the consequences for you? So that's kind of one piece that we could talk about. Your second question.
The simulation.
Yes. Yeah, so I've thought about this question a lot too. So to me, it seems like simulating, thinking about a future event might be more about mentalizing and perspective taking, and maybe it's more difficult to have the affective piece when someone's not feeling something right in front of you. So I do think that I was actually talking about this idea with someone, thinking about whether your ability to empathize also relates to how you predict future events and thinking about motivations in the future. So I describe positive empathy in two different contexts. Like, you might tell me a positive event and I might empathize, or I might be simulating it. So I haven't yet tested whether it's correspondent across all those different situations. I'm predicting that it would be, but I haven't tested it. So I think it could be potentially maybe more related to the cognitive piece to simulate. So, but maybe you're more motivated if you're thinking about that affective response. So there's a little bit of work on the identifiable victim effect. But what I've seen recently is some cool research showing you see a smiling orphan versus kind of a faceless, so like a silhouette of someone. You're more likely to donate when you see the smiling orphan. So kind of thinking about maybe these people are imagining the positive response, and that's mediated, at least, well, this is a neural study, but it's mediated by positive arousal. So I think that there needs to be more work done. That's not conclusive, but it suggests maybe there's something about the affective response that could be related to being more likely to donate to someone. So, but to be determined. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I'm curious about your thoughts on interactions between an individual's goals and the type of situation eliciting the positive empathy. For example, I could see someone that's high in attachment avoidance being more towards someone's interpersonal successes, because the anxious person would value closeness more. The avoidant person might be more sensitive and empathetic to like a career success or some non-social domain.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about if you consider individual differences like that.
Yeah, so I did measure in my kind of development of the trait scale, looked at avoidant attachment and found that it had a negative relationship with positive empathy. So that's just thinking about it at a trait level, and you're talking about more of a situational context. So I haven't had a chance to look at how attachment in particular would interact with across different contexts. But I think that kind of thinking about different domains, like I was talking about earlier, might kind of predict that, and thinking about the different types of targets you might be connecting with too, your close other versus distant others, things like that. But yeah, I don't yet have an answer, but I think that it's important to understand the contextual influences on positive empathy. And kind of one other thought on that is thinking about how whether people are consistently empathic with people who are distant versus close, or whether some people spend their empathy in some sense on people close and then they don't worry about the periphery. I think that's another like interesting difference that's not captured in a trait scale. We would need to like do something either experimentally or kind of thinking about social network. You could even imagine you could map the distance, how many nodes, how many connections away someone is. Does that impact your empathy towards them? So thanks for all.
And there, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for all the great questions.